Evening, everybody. Hope everybody's well. Thanks for attending the virtual meeting of the Governance Committee. And for those that don't know me, my name's Councillor Ian Watkinson, and I'm the chair of the committee. Councillor Colin Sharples is the vice chair, but he's joining us remotely tonight. First time we've had a virtual governance meeting, so please bear with us if things go wrong. It is an audio and video meeting, and it is being recorded, and the stream will also be live on YouTube. So first time for most of us on YouTube anyway, I'm sure. The web address for this is displayed on the agenda for the meeting and can be found on the council's website. Members are asked to keep their microphone on mute if you can, and only unmute when you wish to speak. The officers will present each report, after which I'll invite the external auditors and relevant cabinet member to comment and then bring the item into committee. If any committee members wish to speak, then unmute your microphone, say your name, or use the raise a hand feature, or use the chat function, which is, I'm not sure if it's at the top or the bottom of the screen, but it's somewhere. Oh, it says the top right hand corner. All right, and then I'll invite you to speak. After the committee has considered the report, I'll read out any representations by members not on the committee or members of the public, and we do have a couple of questions. And I am aiming for this meeting to be a maximum of 90 minutes. Less is even better. But due to the links across the items at 5, 6 and 7, I'd encourage members to cross-reference, if you can, the questions as we consider the annual governance statement. Our monitoring officer, Chris Moister, will repeat the recommendations before the vote's taken to ensure everyone is aware of what's being voted on. And I'll try to call each member alphabetically to vote, and Chris will confirm the outcome of that decision. If everything goes pop and the technology fails, then I'll adjourn the meeting for a few minutes to try and get it fixed. If things go absolutely pear-shaped, then we'll have to look at a new time and date. But fingers crossed, it's going to work. So please can I ask all members to confirm they can see, hear and speak before the meeting begins, just to test that you're all working. So I'll call you out alphabetically. So Councillor Bretherton. You'll have to unmute yourself, Damien.
There you go. Is that okay?
That's brilliant, mate. I can see and hear you. Thanks for that.
Okay.
Councillor Clark.
Yes, can see and hear.
Okay, can't see on my. Oh yeah, you're on the big screen, Colin. So that's all right.
Oh yeah.
Councillor Amelia. Christine.
Hello.
Hiya, Christine.
Hiya.
Okay, you're working as well. Councillor Sharples.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm here. I'm clear.
Okay, thanks, Colin. Councillor Mrs. Smith.
Yes, I'm here and I can see. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And Councillor Turner.
Yeah, I can see and hear. I'm looking at the YouTube feed and it's not on.
Okay.
Doesn't seem
okay.
to. I don't know if someone can look at that.
Yeah. Charles, can you have a look at that, please? Okay, thanks for that. So can we just check on our external auditors as well? So, Marky?
Yep, here, loud and clear. Yeah,
excellent. It's like being back in school, isn't it? Taking the register. Simon Harman?
Simon sends his apologies, Chair.
Okay, apologies from Simon. And the relevant cabinet member, Councillor Foster.
I'm here, Chair, and can hear and see you all.
Thanks very much. And our officers, we've got Gary Hall.
Yes, Chair.
Chris Sinnott.
Yeah, I can hear you and see you.
Thanks very much. Chris Moister.
Yes, Chair, I can hear and see. Thank you.
Marvellous. James Thompson.
Yes, Chair, I can see and hear you.
Brilliant. Dave Whelan.
Yes, Chair, I can hear and see.
Thanks very much. Janice Bamber.
Yes, Chair, I can hear and see you.
Darren Crenshaw.
Yes, Chair.
And last and definitely not least, Coral Asprey.
Yes, Chair, thank you.
Marvellous. We seem to be working and we'll crack on. So we move on to the items. Item number 1, apologies. With no apologies received, unless I've heard anything different. No, okay. Item 2, declarations of interest. Because it's a virtual meeting, if a member has a pecuniary interest, they're requested to leave the meeting completely rather than just mute the microphone. The member can rejoin the meeting following the completion of the item in question. Does anyone have any interest to declare? Just give it a second. I'm assuming that's a no. Can't see anybody shaking their head. So, okay, we'll move on to item number 3 and the minutes of the last meeting. I've got the minutes of the last meeting in front of me for approval. Do we have a seconder for those so we can approve those minutes, please? Councillor Sharples. Is he muted?
I think I was. I was at the meeting, although I wasn't on the committee at that time. I'm quite happy to second him if that's what you require.
It is, and we'll take that those are seconded and approved. Thanks very much for that. Item number 4, suspension of Standing Order 33. Members are asked to approve the suspension of Standing Order 33. Arrangements have been made for members of the public to submit their representations to Democratic Services, and we've had a couple of questions, and the meeting is being live streamed to YouTube, and hopefully that's working okay now. So I'm going to move that Standing Order 33 be suspended for the duration of this meeting. Do we have a seconder for that, please?
I'll second, Chair.
Thanks very much. Okay. Everybody okay with that? Excellent. We'll move on. Okay. Do we need to vote on that formally? I'm just looking over. Yeah, we do. I'm told that we need to vote on that formally, so I'm going to call each member out alphabetically to vote on the motion. It's not quite as onerous as a card vote, is it? But it's in the same ballpark. So, sorry, it's roll call time again. So, Councillor Bretherton, we're just approving the motion. The suspension of Standing Order 33. Thanks very much. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to comment, actually, because I had some reservations about this, because I didn't think it was in accordance with our open and transparency principles of the Council. But I think I'm happy to vote for it. But I reserve the privilege to raise some of these issues at a later date. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Clark, and noted. Yeah, we're in very unprecedented times, aren't we? Councillor Amelia.
Yes, I approve it.
Thanks very much. Councillor Sharples.
Yes, I approve.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mrs. Smith.
Yes, I approve.
Thanks very much. And Councillor Angela Turner. You're still muted. Councillor Turner, are you with us? Can you approve or not? Can you unmute? You have to unmute yourself, Ange. Apparently you're still muted. Or I tell you what, if you're struggling with it, type it into the chat function if you're having a problem with your mic. Oh, there she is. Is that okay?
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Okay, we'll move on then to item number. That is unanimous. Thanks very much, Darth. That's unanimous. We'll move on to item 5 and the draft annual governance statement 2018-19 and 2019-20. And If you're not sure we can access it, it's starting on page 13 of the supplementary agenda. I'm going to invite Chris Moyster to present this item. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Members, and I do apologise for the late provision of this report and the associated documents. It is a lengthy report, or at least it's a lengthy AGS on this occasion. As I say, I do apologise that you haven't had as much time as we would have liked for you to have considered it. However, I hope you've had sufficient time. Just to cover off, what is the purpose of the AGS? Well, it's a requirement of the regulations. And it's a requirement of this authority to review the effectiveness of the internal control environment, and then as a result of that review, to prepare the annual governance statement. This statement, once prepared, then has to be approved by the governance committee, as it is at South Ribble. And in considering whether to approve this document, you're obliged to take into account internal audit's opinion, hence the attachment of the internal audit annual report, which will form part of the AGS but hasn't actually been added as yet. So what is the system that we are testing against? What is the system of internal control? Well, for the purposes of the AGS, and it is spelt out within the document, it is the effective exercise of the council's functions to achieve the council's aims and objectives. The framework ensures financial and operational management of the authority is effective, and it's testing that there are effective arrangements in place to manage risk. So it's against this framework that this AGS has been prepared. It's a fact-based document, and it's drawn from evidence, some of which is provided with the additional reports. The background to this AGS, and I do think it's important just to cover off this area. In 2018-19, neither external or internal audit were able to agree the AGS as a correct document. This has meant that we've had to prepare an AGS that covers 2 years. Neither, and it's worth commenting that there was the statement of accounts signed off for last year. And in fact, in 2017-18, a Section 24 report was prepared and issued by external audit on the basis that there'd been a failure to implement an agreed LGA improvement plan. And I mention this only because it is referenced within the AGS, and it is one of the reasons why external audit were unable to sign off last year's document. Since that date, and you'll note further governance failings have been identified, and these are set out in more detail in the report. So just to recap, this AGS has to cover a 2-year period. That's from 2018-19 and 2019-20. It takes as a starting point the failing that had already been identified, the failure to progress the improvement plan, but it also includes, as it should do, all reference to additional failings identified since that 2018-19 AGS. So what is the document itself? Well, there's key presentational elements to it, some of which will be familiar to members as it tries to follow the SIPFA template. Section 3 details what frameworks are in place and what steps the authority takes to comply with its governance framework. Section 4 addresses how as a council, we undertake the assessment against this framework annually, and it also includes the opinion of the internal audit. And then finally, Section 5, which is the key part of the document, it identifies the significant governance failings. So in a bit more detail, there is quite, I've introduced on this occasion an introduction to the report. This isn't into the AGS. This isn't something you will have seen previously. But I thought it was important to put this document into the context I've just outlined. Section 1 of the report says what we are responsible for. And again, this explains that as South Ribble Council are responsible for ensuring that business is conducted in accordance with the law and to high standards. And there is a section which I have highlighted in red to explain why this annual governance statement differs so significantly from those presented previously. I have not hidden anything in this document. Where I felt that something should be brought attention to, I've highlighted it. I think it's very important because members have to remember that this is a document that is presented to the public. It's one of the key governance documents for the council. I've already mentioned what the purpose of the governance framework is. Right, our governance framework is section 3, and that's at page 23 of the agenda. This is a table that members of the committee may be familiar with. It contains the framework, the policy framework and the procedure framework against which the council can demonstrate compliance and can demonstrate that it has the necessary documents and policies to actually deliver internal controls. The difference that has been in this table this year is an inclusion of a comment section. What I don't want members of the committee to think is simply because we have policies and processes in place, that in itself is sufficient to comply with our obligations in ethical and good governance. It isn't. And the comment section details where despite the fact that policies and processes are in place, that there have been failings relating to these. You'll note that there's comments in most sections. Section 4 of the report, which starts on, he says, quickly thumbing through. It's easier when you have paper sometimes. Section 4 is at page 47. Again, it explains how, as a council, we monitor and review the effectiveness of this governance framework throughout the year. Again, there are detailed structures in place to oversee and review the effectiveness of the internal controls, but they will only be an effective review where there is transparency and challenge. And again, section 5, which we'll come on to in a moment, will detail where failings have arisen in this review process. That is not to say that these are not suitable and appropriate methods of review, only that they haven't been used properly. Finally, section 5, which is page 53 onwards, this is a significant departure from previous presentations of annual governance statements that members will have seen, but it is the most significant part of the document in many respects. It would generally highlight an individual failing, or maybe 2 or 3 at the most. You would usually look to what the cause of that particular failing was and then propose some form of improvement that can remedy that failing. Here, there have been identified effectively systematic corporate governance failings. So, and this section recognises this, and it tries to recognise that the cause is not a single officer or single policy failing or single meeting failing. It's a combination of issues that have just led to these failings arising. The narrative tries to address this, and the narrative section, which again starts on page 54, splits out the failings into themes. The first theme is leadership, and it has to be recognised, and it's arguably as a consequence of the survey, the issuing of the Section 24 report. Leadership has been changeable at South Ribble Council over the last few years. That is just something that has arisen. Again, there's no single cause or fault for that, but it has to be recognised that by not having clear leadership in place, this has an impact on a governance environment. Leadership isn't a single individual, and I don't want members to take that view away. This is leadership throughout the council. This is the leadership team, this is senior managers, and it's even individuals, taking leadership roles and owning issues. Traced into that is culture. This has been acknowledged as an issue by the council previously, so this perhaps won't necessarily be new to members. Attempts have been made to address this issue, and whilst the principles proposed were sound, and I reference to blended working in this. That's a sound principle, but it has to be implemented properly as well in order to ensure good governance. It's not clear that that was, and it led to confusion in the mind of some staff and confused decision-making processes as a result. I am hopeful that, although my screen's gone off, that yes, that's fine, I'm still on. The final two elements that have been highlighted as themes are processes, which is, and you'll recognise this from section 3 with the table where policies haven't been updated or improved, and again a lack of ownership over particular issues as a result of perhaps changes to leadership lines and management lines, and then finally monitoring and review. Which again, if you had that, then some of these matters had that more clear, then some of these issues would have been picked up previously. So moving on to section 5, and I will stop shortly. I hope everyone's happy to know. We have again broken this down. Section 5A to 5D is effectively the evidence base to support some of the findings and conclusions in the earlier sections of the annual governance statement. Section 5A at page 57 confirms matters that have actually been actioned following the recommendations in the 2018 annual governance statement. So again, I am not suggesting there hasn't been improvements or progress, but there is still a long way to go in relation to the governance framework and governance environment. Section 5B identifies issues that were identified in May 2019. So that's when the AGS was presented this time last year, which were identified as issues and prevented the annual governance statement being accepted at that time. And members again will note that whilst governance failings have been identified, some actions have been done to remedy those, but there remain some actions outstanding from those matters identified. 5C identifies, and this perhaps ties more closely to the remaining two reports, matters that have come to light since May 2019. Now again, governance is something that requires continuous improvement through continuous testing, so it is not a surprise that new matters are highlighted. And members shouldn't necessarily be shocked by that. But what I have to stress is these are things that are quite serious, and they are matters where, for example, the GDPR compliance identified at page 62, where GDPR was not fully implemented in accordance with legislation requirements. Section 5D then states the remedial action taken. Some of that relates to the matters identified in 5C, and again, members will have had an opportunity to read that. Perhaps the most important part of the annual governance statement this time is the remaining actions. What are we going to do to actually get ourselves back in a position where we have a strong governance framework? And that are the matters identified in the table at page 67 and 68. And we have quite a testing timetable for these improvements. And again, it's worth stressing that we are in a position to meet this testing timetable in part because of the implementation work that's been done in the last 12 months, particularly around recruitment to senior posts, which addresses some of the issues around leadership and around capacity. So that's where we are, Chair. We have an action plan that we would recommend, and an annual governance statement that is at least ready in draft that we would recommend to the Governance Committee for approval, and I'm happy to take questions on it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chris, for that summary. And I'll say now that there's a heck of a lot of work going into producing these statements and everything, all the way around it. So thanks for all that hard work and for the comprehensive documents that you've all produced. In terms of following on from your summary, I think the suggestion is that we're going to hear some comments from Mark Heap at this point.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah. I don't really have many comments to make about it at this stage, Chair. I think the main comment to make is that obviously this annual governance statement forms a key element of the Council's accounts. I haven't reviewed it in detail at this stage, Chair. That will be my intention to do that over the summer, along with all the supporting evidence that goes behind it. There'll be a full and comprehensive review. Our audit for 2018-19 is ongoing and will be concluded over the summer.
Thanks very much. Thanks for that, Mark. Okay, I'm suggesting now that we take some comments from the relevant cabinet member, and that would be Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to be brief and get straight to the point. The annual governance statement for 2018-19, in my view, is appalling. And as it says, there's been a pattern of behaviour of the failure to follow governance appropriately for a number of years now. As I said to you all last year on the governance committee, I did not recognise the statements that were made within the original AGS of last year. And unfortunately, it's proved to be much worse than I anticipated. There are a number of issues here that are going to have to be taken up by Council and at Council as well. And clearly we'll do that in July and moving forward. But what I can say to the committee is hopefully you'll note that since 2019 and the new administration, we've been committed fully to compliance with all corporate governance and transparency. And I can assure you all that there is a new culture within South Ribble, and that is a much better culture. And I'm willing to take any questions you may have later. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Foster. Okay, we'll bring in comments or questions now from members of the committee. Can anybody who wants to make a comment or ask a question indicate now? Councillor Brotherton. Or it might be that they don't have questions
Hello,
or comments.
can you hear me?
Oh, I can now. Yeah.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, thank you very much. As you know, I'm a relatively new member. I've read the document. What came to mind is a couple of comments in the document, and I'd just like to make a note that just hope in the future that some of these comments will be taken into account and not repeated. So, for example, on page 25, there's a comment there that says failure to achieve and demonstrate value for money. But I noticed on the 28th of May, there was a press report relating to the planning application for the Mackenzie Arms site. And I'm just wondering if that comment, failure to achieve and demonstrate value for money, could refer in the future to the Mackenzie Arms site. Because it's already been established, for example, on the surveyor's report, that the potential permanent loss of capital could be in the region of £700,000. So to me, that is a substantial risk. Could it be that we need to put that on the risk register going forward? Because, as I say, there is a risk of permanent yet avoidable loss of capital on that one project. And we just need to make sure, bearing in mind we've had these two reports here, and the auditors have brought up potential risks and value for money, etc. Just going forward, I hope we don't repeat those mistakes. Just over to you. Hello?
Chairman?
Chair.
Can't hear.
Chair?
Can't hear you, Chair.
I do apologise. I made that classic mistake, and I'm still muted. Now I'm unmuted. So thanks for that, Councillor Brotherton. Gary, I'll answer that question or that comment.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's a specific item that Councillor Brotherton is referring to. I mean the key point I think on that report, whilst you may not have agreed with the conclusion, was the decision was open and transparent, so people understood the consequences of the additional expenditure that was being incurred and the outputs that they may get. So what the auditor will look for, and Mark might come in at this point, what the auditor will look for is that members made an informed decision. So my belief is that, just referring to that report, that actually all the information was presented to members and they made a judgment based upon the information presented. And that's the key. So that's one of the things that we'll look to be doing as we move forward to make sure that members have the right information. That's one of the value for money judgments that the external auditor will make. He'll make a judgment. Was information presented to members to enable them to make a decision? That's one of the key elements of value for money. So I take your point, but I think in that instance, then my view would be that actually we complied with the value for money requirements required by the external auditor.
Okay.
Mark,
I think Councillor Brotherton had another.
Yeah, can I come back?
not yet. Mark, do you want to add anything on the item?
Only just to say, echo what Gary said. I've no comments to make about that particular specific issue at this stage, but I would echo what Gary's comments were in terms of decision making, that members have all relevant information in front of them, that they consider all relevant information and do not consider irrelevant information.
Okay.
Thanks for that. Councillor Brotherton.
Yep. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, no, I appreciate that members will make a decision, but is there anything in place there to protect ourselves from the members making decisions that could lose us permanent loss of capital? So, for example, is there something in place to stop members taking huge risks with taxpayers' money that could potentially lose a significant amount of capital, as proven by a professional surveyor? You know, if a professional surveyor says that there will be a £700,000 capital loss, is there something in place there to protect ourselves from members making those kind of decisions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, just back to the.
Gary.
Yeah. Sorry, just back to the point I made earlier. The role of the statutory officers is to ensure that members have the relevant information. So, and that decisions are made in that transparent way. So, I accept that you may feel that actually the information that was provided wasn't accurate in that instance, but we took a view, or members took a view, based on the information that they had, that there wouldn't be a significant capital loss on that item. And it's back to my point about the role of officers is to provide information for members to make a decision, and that's the check and balance. And if any member feels that the information that's provided to them doesn't enable them to make a proper decision, then it's within their gift to say so. And that's the check and balance.
Okay.
Chair, could I speak?
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Councillor Brotherton. I'm going to got a question from Councillor Turner next.
Mrs. Smith.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I've actually got two questions, if you don't mind, sorry. The first question is in terms of the governance failing, and in particular the lack of leadership criteria that was picked up. So the question there is governance a major requirement, do you think, for a new chief executive?
Chair, do you want me to take that one?
Yeah, go on, Chris.
Thank you. I'll take it to avoid Gary's blushes, really. Yes, as monitoring officer, as someone who has responsibility for the governance framework of the council, along with the other statutory officers, yes, absolutely. The chief executive will be the head of paid service. They are fundamental to the role of good decision making within a council. So yes, absolutely. A strong governance background, a strong belief in the need for governance is very important.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Am I allowed another question?
Yeah, go on. I'll let you get your second question.
Okay. I just a statement, really, Chris, about the action plans that you kind of took us through, going from, I think, page 58. It's just occurred to me that some of those themes are actually that are leading to the recommended improvements, which and the actions. Some of those themes are actually dynamic, so they're going to be a continuous action. So then it wouldn't be fair for me to challenge the officers and say on the status, or there's no column there for a target day of when these actions are going to be improved. So I'd just like to suggest, if it's seen as appropriate, that maybe we put another column on the action plans, unless that's outside the stipulated format, which shows which ones are dynamic and which ones are static. So we know that there'll be the continuous improvement on some of these themes. And then we also will be able to tell how the operational effectiveness of the council is in closing down the recommended improvements for the ones which are static.
Chair, I'm quite happy to answer that. Yeah, the intention will be with the action plan is to report back to audit committee pretty much on a meeting basis. So where we are progressing matters, we will report them. Now, I don't want it to become a burden to the audit committee. It might be that it's better to report by exception where progress hasn't been as desired. What we try to do with the action plan itself, though, is pick items where we make discrete improvements that will contribute to what I think you're meaning is the wider themes around culture in particular is going to be very difficult to measure changes. So if you consider the action page 67, we're looking at actions which we can deliver that we feel will have an impact on culture. So the review of the corporate governance policies and strategies in relation to anti-fraud and corruption, anti-bribery, whistleblowing complaints are all cultural documents in some respect. And then the delivery of training to officers about governance and ethical awareness, again, is something that will go to the cultural improvement. So we've tried to put specific measurable targets and actions in place that will have a impact. Now, measuring that wider impact, you're absolutely right. It's going to be very difficult to do and report back on, but there'll be other ways to do that. And no doubt there'll be as part of the, where is it? There's one of these around. Agree an approach to monitoring and managing the implementation of management actions actually will help to serve that purpose. So we'll actually be bringing things back to say, well, this is how we intend to do to measure it, how we can demonstrate the improvement.
Is that answering your question, Councillor Turner? She was on mute, but I think I lip read you saying that was okay. Am I right? Yeah, she's nodding. Thanks, Councillor Turner. Okay, next question, Councillor Mrs. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chris, for very helpful. The quality at the moment is very good. I couldn't quite catch what Mark was saying about the amount of work that's going to be done on the annual audit report. Did he say it will be in the summer when he was hoping to report back? And will that be in time to go with the accounts when they are signed off, hopefully?
Happy to respond, Chair, if that would help.
Muted. Thanks very much, Chris. Yep.
Yeah. The annual governance statement is an integral part of the accounts. So the one can't go without the other. So when I do give an opinion, it will be over the whole package, if you will. I'm not at this stage prepared to say when that will be, other than to say that we will be carrying out a very detailed, comprehensive review of the AGS and all the evidence behind it. That will be being carried out over the summer, but I'm not prepared at this stage to say when that will be concluded.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks very much. Do we have any other comments or questions? Councillor Amelia.
Yes, I'd just like to ask if Chris Moyster has ever seen such a pattern of behaviour as highlighted in the 2018-19 report.
Chris?
No. That's not to say it hasn't existed at other places, and I would rather that members recognise what happened, but concentrate on ways we can move forward to improve. This governance is about improvement. It's not necessarily, we have to have a review to look at why things happened, but that's not necessarily, it's recognising it. It's not looking for a way to point a finger or blame somebody for it. This was a number of different factors that led to this. So a straightforward answer to the question is no, but I wouldn't want members necessarily to dwell on that.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. Thanks for your question, Councillor Amelia. I think we have a question from Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
I can.
Good. As a lot of these failings from a governance point of view relate to officers and to members, I'm just wondering how aware members are, particularly those who came on board last year, regarding the current council policies, strategies and procedures, so that they can actually be aware when they want to make a contribution to the governance. Now, I'd like to know where those are located. I think they're on the internet, intranet, should I say. And I wondered if they do contain a review date, and who decides about that review, and who has the responsibility for monitoring compliance with the policies. Because I think that new members, talking to some of them, they're not completely aware of that. And as the failings do seem to fall on members just as much, or not, perhaps not just as much, but certainly as far as members are concerned, they have a responsibility. So that's my first question. If I can come on to just some points within the text.
Yes, thanks for that, Councillor Clark. Let's see if we can get a response on that first part. David, can you help us with that? And just for members' information, Gary's having some technical difficulties at the moment, so I'll let you know when he's back online. But David, can you come back with a response on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The policies are indeed on intranet. They're also on the council's website. There is a specific area on the website dedicated to all our policies. The responsibility for maintaining and updated policies rests with a number of officers. Some are owned, as it were, by legal services, some by audit, some by financial services. What the audit work carried out recently into ethical governance revealed, although I hasten to add this was not an audit that had a limited rating, but nevertheless some of the policies were clearly in need of review, and hence that's why in the action plan moving forward, Chris Moyster and myself are tasked with ensuring that all those policies are updated as soon as possible.
Okay.
So if I can come back on that, as far as the future is concerned, and protecting both officers and members. When we review it, will we have a review date so that there isn't the same lapse as has occurred over quite a period of years? Those officers do, in fact, change positions. New officers come on board.
David?
I never thought that.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Clark. Can you repeat that comment and question?
Yeah.
David had a technical problem as well, but say it again if you can.
Well, there is a programme of review that he's just mentioned. What I'm asking now is that when this is reviewed, and if they have to be updated, because review doesn't always mean that we change things, but it is reviewed. There should be, in my opinion, a review date in there, so that in fact we don't have this lapse of reviews which has occurred over the years, because officers do change, they move in and out.
David?
Yes, Councillor Clark. Apologies for the technical issues I had. I think your comment is a perfectly reasonable one. I think the idea of having a definite review date on all our policies makes sense. Another thing I should have mentioned is we need to also make sure that the corporate governance group, which is a group of senior statutory officers, that they also have oversight of all these documents and make sure that everything is reviewed as and when required. That is something that has slipped by the wayside in recent times, and that needs to be resurrected.
Okay, and if I just come on to some perhaps incorrections in the statement, it mentions that shadow cabinet briefings would take place. I haven't had any this year. I've not known of any being arranged, and also joint cabinet and shadow cabinet meetings. I'm not aware of any of those meetings taking place. So those perhaps are factual incorrections in the report.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Clark. Shadow cabinet briefings. Councillor Foster, do you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. In the year 2018-19, shadow cabinet briefings did take place, Colin. We attended them. They have been offered by the new administration for 1920, but the Councillor Mrs Smith hasn't taken up that opportunity yet, but they are in place if they're wanted. And I'd also like to add, we have offered for some considerable time over the past 12 months for joint meetings with the shadow cabinet, but as we're currently sat here, we're not even aware who the shadow cabinet is, so that's proving a little bit challenging. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Clark, did you have anything else that you wanted?
No, I just thought that Gary Holbert might come back on the first one, because it's down to us as shadow cabinet members to receive a briefing on anything that's being put forward to cabinet.
If I could just come in, Mr. Chairman, please.
I'll just let Gary answer, Councillor Mrs Smith.
I'll defer to Mrs Smith.
Okay, that's fine. Go for it, Margaret.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Gary has offered shadow cabinet meetings to us, briefings, and we have taken some of them up. At no time during this last 12 months has there been any suggestion that we would meet as cabinet and a shadow cabinet, so that is incorrect. It's certainly, if you are offering it, it hasn't come down to me. So that is something that I do not know about, and that's why they haven't been taken up, because they haven't been offered. So I'd just like to correct that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. I think that's something that can be followed up outside of this meeting. Any other questions or comments on this item? Okay, thanks very much for that. So we're now at the end of the debate on this proposal. We have a proposer. I'm going to propose it. Have we got a seconder? Councillor Sharples?
I'll second it.
I'll second that, yeah.
Oh, there we go. An argument-free wants to second it. That's great. Okay, so we'll do the roll call like we did before, and I'll call out your names, and if you can confirm that you're happy with the proposal. So, Councillor Bretherton.
Yes.
Thanks very much. Councillor Clark.
For it.
Thank you. Councillor Amelia.
Yes, approve it.
Thanks very much. Councillor Sharples.
Yes, I approve.
Thanks very much. Councillor Mrs. Smith.
Yes, I approve.
Thanks a lot. And Councillor Mrs. Turner.
Yes.
Thanks very much, Angela. Chris, can you confirm the outcome of that vote?
Yes, Chair. The recommendation that the annual governance statement be approved in draft form for consideration by external audit has been passed unanimously.
Thank you very much, which takes us on to item number 6, the internal audit progress report, audit reports with limited assurance opinion. And I'm going to, I think it's on to page 79, is that right? Starts on page 79 if you need to have a look at that. And I'm going to invite Janice Bamber to present this item. Janice.
Thank you, Chair. The report that sits before you is the report that outlines those reviews where the opinion of the control environment has been determined to be limited for the period since the last Governance Committee, which was the 28th of January, up to the end of May. The reports were all included at the appendices, and as Appendix 2, there is a brief outline of the findings, the governance issues, and any available updates to those reports. There are 4 reports relating to South Ribble services and one relating to a service that sits within the shared environment, which is creditors. There are also a further 2 reports where internal audits have reached the opinion that the controls operating provide no assurance that risks are being mitigated and controls are appropriate. These reports relate to 2 specific areas in regards to procurement and the health and wellbeing campus project management. It should be recognised, however, that whilst there are appropriate frameworks in place, for example, the contract procedure rules are in place, project management framework is in place, it is the fact that these projects have failed. Sorry, the controls within these projects and contracts have failed. Members should note that the opinion of no insurance only relates to the specific procurement exercises or contracts and the specific projects that have been reviewed, and does not mean it's endemic across all services. The findings arising from the review are included in the AGS and support the findings in the AGS. It should also be noted that these 2 reports are currently draft reports and are yet to be discussed and agreed with managers, so the management actions aren't agreed yet. I'm happy to take questions on the reports.
Thanks very much for that, Janice. And I do apologise, I've got a locket in my mouth, so if you can pick that up, that's my problem. Okay, no, we'll ask if Mark wants to come in and make any comments at this point.
No comments from me, Chair. These are internal audit reports.
Thank you very much. Councillor Foster.
Cheers, Chair. Once again, we thank the internal audit team for the work that they've done and the detailed reports that they've put forward. There are a number of actions ongoing from all the internal audit reports that the Chief Executive and the statutory officers are dealing with, and it would be inappropriate for me to comment on them all at this point. However, clearly reports will be brought back to the Governance Committee. One area of major concern for both myself and my colleagues in the Cabinet is clearly the leisure and Wellbeing Campus, and how £533,000 has been spent since January, when the council's officers and previous administration were clearly aware that it was unaffordable. Again, I give the committee my word. We will get to the bottom of this, and we will be taking this up in council in July. And I'm happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Foster. Did you want to come back on that, Janice, or shall I move to the rest of the committee?
No, Chair, I've nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay, so I can do this by going alphabetically or see if any, oh, there we go. No need for that. It's great because Coral sorted it out with massive letters so I can see who wants to ask a question, and it's Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. In the report, Janice, it mentions about a formally adopted policy to be implemented in February 2020 for tree inspection and maintenance, because we didn't have one. Has that taken place?
It has, yes.
So there is a policy, but we did agree, or at least the cabinet agreed, to the planting of trees. Was that in advance of that policy?
The policy is to do with the classification for inspection and maintenance, not to do with the corporate plan and the ambitions of the administration. It's actually to do with the controls and processes put in place, the governance framework put in place to make sure that those trees inspected and maintained are done so in accordance with the policy of the council. So each tree is given a category and it's inspected on that basis, whichever category it falls into. So the two are not linked, if you see what I mean. Yeah, it's to do with defending insurance claims around trees more than anything.
Right. So in fact, the trees that we're planting, all these trees, they don't have a maintenance issue, do they not?
They will be included in the policy. So each tree, I'm not an expert in trees, but each tree is given put into a category of how often it should be inspected, and then from the inspection, this maintenance is done. So each tree will be included in the tree policy.
Okay. Second question, if I can ask that, Chair.
Go on.
There was a consultant's report on the asset management register, and that was done in May, I think, this year, wasn't it? I'm leading on to a secondary question.
So yes,
Go on.
Are you referring to the report that the internal audit did, or the report that?
I've asked the question for some time whether the asset management register is fit for purpose, and the question I'm asked, and obviously there was a consultant's report commissioned, I understand, which concluded in May. Now, what I wanted to know really was whether this asset register is just in relation to commercial properties, or is it in relation to all the land assets we have as well? Because otherwise, it's incomplete, because it goes down to the council's asset register.
As I understand it, it's in relation to all the assets of the council.
Okay, we'll check on that.
Okay. Thanks, Janice. Thanks, Councillor Clark. Any other comments, Coral? Any big? No, nothing else. Okay. Right. Thanks for that, Janice. Comprehensive piece of work again, and we've covered some of that ground already in the AGS debate. So we are at the end of the debate on this proposal, and we need. Oh, are we still not done questions on this anymore? Oh, thanks for prompting me. I'm getting prompts from around me. We have got
Chair.
3 questions. Now's the time to take this. Yeah, we'll take these 2 questions. Do you want to read out the question, please, Darren, that you got
Will do, Chair.
late in the day? Thanks very much.
The first question. I've just read the internal audit that is to be presented at the Governor's meeting tonight, written by Janice Bamber. The report is very comprehensive and paints a damning state of the running of SRBC by senior management. But the ultimate responsibility lies with the councillors, which enable the poor practice and not holding senior management to account. I cannot comprehend how much of the ratepayers' money has been wasted by this council, as it states in the report, major failure to demonstrate value for money in procurement. I have 2 questions that I require answering. 1, how many managers have been disciplined or dismissed? 2, why have councillors allowed this to happen?
Thanks, Darren. I think I'm going to ask Gary to respond to that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question. It's really not the remit of the Governance Committee to deal with staffing items, so it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment on individual positions. However, there are 2 things I would say. The report, the internal audit report, set out that actually there was a failure to provide training and organisational development in some circumstances. So that's something that we need to rectify moving forward. And we do have the appropriate staffing policies and procedures to deal with underperformance. And if I feel that there are any items of underperformance, then I will deal with them through the appropriate procedures. In relation to the councillor question, I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment on that. I think that's probably an issue for debate at the council meeting in July.
Thanks, Gary. I agree with you. Now's not the time for that that sort of a discussion. We have another question, Darren.
Thank you, Chair. And this is similar to the question that has just been asked. On the basis of the content of the report, how many of the staff have been disciplined or dismissed?
Gary.
I think I've already answered that question. It's not appropriate for discussion at this committee.
Okay. We've got a question from Councillor Mrs. Smith.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I take it that these reports that are all in draft will be produced and then they will come back to the council meeting. We're not going to the individually this evening, I take it.
Do you know what? You broke up a little bit there, Councillor Mrs.
Are we
Smith.
going through them individually? Well, yes, I realise that, Mr. Chairman, and I have to say I can see that quite a number of the committee are actually in the building and the rest of us are outside using this technology, which is very poor this evening. The connections are very bad and you're breaking up all the time. It really is very hard work. What I was asking was, are we actually debating the individual reports this evening? Just going to the committee coming back to council.
Chris Moister, can you help us with that, please?
Well, the reports are being presented, Chair, because they are reports where there are limited or no assurance, and they would generally go to Governance Committee. That's the practice here, where there's limited or no assurance to make members aware of the results of these audits. Given where we are with the AGS process and that these are feeding into it, they will almost certainly feed into some of the conclusions of the AGS. So whilst they perhaps won't be presented as drawn to council, they would certainly fall out of the AGS debate.
Okay, thanks for that. And that certainly is the situation. The Governance Committee did ask for those reports with that sort of a rating to come to this committee in that way. So does that answer your question, Councillor Mrs Smith?
No, well, no, there is a couple of things actually I would like to comment on. Councillor Foster has said that he will get to the bottom of the health and wellbeing, whatever it is, the wellbeing campus. I will certainly be not inaccurate within that.
I'm sorry, Councillor Mrs Smith, your connection is a poor one. Apologies, I'm not sure why that is, but we're not getting you coming through. I'm sorry, Councillor Mrs Smith, you're going to have to repeat that again. You're frozen up at this end.
Breaking up all the time, and it's a very, very poor way.
Yeah, I accept that. You seem to be having particular problems with your connection.
No, I can hear some of it when it's not breaking up. But what I'm saying is they are breaking up, and it's a very poor way at the moment to be debating things like this.
It is what it is. It is what it is, Councillor Smith. So we'll do our best with the technology. Let's try and tackle the questions.
Right. What I was saying was Councillor Foster mentioned being campus, and he will get to the bottom of it. Certainly of the same opinion that I should, because there are a number of that need to be. I will be happy to debate that with him at council meeting, which is the ones I've no assurance is the electricity and gas supply. I have spoken to Gary Hall this afternoon about it. Absolutely amazed the way this and I think it certainly has issues that need to be addressed. That someone would contract to other people, or if it was, it wasn't done in, and there's a lot of issues taken forward. I just want. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Mrs Smith, and we'll move on to another question. Thanks. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to come back. I wanted to ask a general question, and I was surprised at the public question, but I think we need to have a clear idea from Janice, what the procedure is for these draft reports, because there's no evidence base listed in them, and I'm a bit concerned that there's been inaccuracies and misrepresentation, maybe incompetence. I don't know, but I'm not accusing of incompetence. But surely there should be a list of persons who were interviewed and documents which are referred to or IT systems for reference purposes. So in fact, the audit trail for us members is complete, not just for Janice herself. So if you could answer me what the procedure is, because they are in draft at the moment, it gives people an opportunity to have a further look at them to make sure there are no inaccuracies in what she says. I've read one or two of the reports, and I'm a bit worried about some of them, which may be inaccuracies. So I'm a bit concerned, actually, Chairman.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Councillor Clark. Janice, do you want to come back on that? Unmute yourself, Janice.
Sorry. The reports go through a quality control check before they're even produced to Governance Committee. So initially, the auditor will complete the work. It is reviewed by a manager who checks the actual file that they produce, looks at the evidence that's helped them form their opinion, and then reviews the report to make sure that the evidence that they've got actually is reflected in the report. There is then a discussion with the manager or the service lead, whoever the auditee client was, to agree the factual accuracy of the reports. The draft report is then presented to the service lead and the director and service lead then have a further opportunity to discuss anything within the report prior to it being produced as a final report. At that point, they will agree the management actions, and the management actions will be agreed, and then only at that point do we sign it off as a final report, and would it be presented to Governance Committee normally. The two draft reports that have been presented today have been presented as draft because work was completed back in the end of April, beginning of May. The reports had been drafted in terms of going through part of the review process. The utilities was probably a bit further on than the health and wellbeing because that had actually been discussed and with the assistant director. The health and wellbeing campus hasn't been discussed yet with the managers to review that work. So we have produced those reports based on the evidence that we have got at the time that we do the audit. If there is further information that is provided by the managers, we would include that in any subsequent report once we have that discussion. But insofar as the Governance Committee, we would not present the files and the evidence to Governance Committee because the professionalism of the auditors, they have a rigorous process to go through before it gets to be a final report. So we have our own checks and balances in place in order to ensure that it's accurate as far as possible, but we can only work on the information that we have at the time. And the information we have at the time leads us to the conclusions that we've got.
Thanks, Janice.
I think the outstanding feature of what Janice has said, that's fine, thank you, Janice, is the fact that some of this relates to failings, perhaps from officers who are no longer with the organisation, so they won't have an opportunity to contribute to your investigations, will they? Should there not be a caveat associated with that?
Can I just clarify, Chair? These reports are not investigation reports. These are audit reports. And the reports are based on the governance failings, breaches of contract procedurals, breaches of financial procedurals, breaches of decision making. They're not based on what individual officers have done. It's based on evidence of governance failings.
Thanks for that, Janice, and thanks, Councillor Clark. I've got three other people waiting to come in, so I'm gonna move on to Councillor Amelia.
Yes, I'd just like to ask a general question. Why didn't the previous cabinet challenge in the way the current one does?
It's not appropriate. That question's not appropriate.
I'm not sure it's quite right, that question for this committee.
Okay.
I can understand why you've asked it,
Yeah.
but I'm going to take another question.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Miller.
Thanks, Ian.
Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Chair. I just felt it really important to comment regarding the comments that have been received from members tonight regarding the internal audit, because there's a pattern of behaviour here. A number of years ago, internal audit reports and also external audit reports were coming to the Governance Committee, and members, the administration at the time, would, rather than acting upon them, would challenge the accuracy. And that's happening again now. All members need to be aware that the independent auditor is exactly that, the independence of the executive, independent of the cabinet, independence even of the chief executive. The internal audit function is reviewing the governance arrangements. The first I get to see as leader of these reports is when it was published. Unless we accept the validity of the internal and external auditors' comments, we will never ever move forward. And I strongly believe that one of the reasons we've suffered such a catastrophic failure of corporate governance over the past 3 or 4 years is the failure of members to accept what the internal audit and external audit are reporting. We need to act upon the findings and improve. There's lots in there that needs to be dealt with and will be dealt with, but these are independent reviews of process, and they're not reports of the executive, nor are they reports of the chief executive. And we need to move on with this now, because I remember when the external auditors 2 or 3 years ago, gave us qualified value for money conclusions and statutory interventions, and all members did, certain members, was challenge the validity. How dare they issue those conclusions rather than doing something about it? And we need to move on. So therefore, as far as I'm concerned, the internal audit will always be recognised and will always be dealt with appropriately. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks for that, Councillor Foster. And we are making progress. There's been a tremendous amount of progress in the last 12 months or so. Thanks very much for that. We've got another question from Councillor Sharples.
I don't need to ask my question because Mr. Councillor Foster's covered just about everything I was going to ask.
Marvellous.
I just find it a little bit concerning that we're asking questions about the content of reports, and in previous administrations didn't even bother to issue some of these reports. So I found it a little bit audacious. Thank you.
Okay. I think the reports and the AGS speak for themselves. Any other questions? Looking over here. Anything else? No? Okay. So I think we're now at the point where we're done with this debate on this proposal. I'm going to propose that we accept this proposal. Well, actually, what is the proposal? What is the proposal? Chris, can you confirm what the proposal is?
Certainly can. I certainly can, Chair. The proposal is that Governance Committee consider and note the attached reports.
Thanks very much for that, Chris. Well, I will move that proposal. Can we have a seconder, please? Councillor Sharples, perhaps?
I'll second that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Sharples. I'm going to... That's all right. Okay, so it's the alphabetical roll call again. So, Councillor Bretherton.
Noted.
Are we accepting or noting this proposal? Remind me.
Noting, Chair.
Just noting. Thanks very much. Councillor Clark.
Considered and noted.
Thanks very much, Councillor Clark. Councillor Amelia.
Noting.
Thank you. Councillor Sharples.
Noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Mrs. Smith. Councillor Mrs. Smith. You just need to unmute, Margaret.
Noted.
Thank you. Thumbs up. Thanks very much. And Councillor Turner.
Noted.
Chris, can you confirm the outcome of that vote?
Yes, please? Chair. Those reports are noted.
Thanks very much, everybody. So moving on to item 7. I'm conscious of the time. We're just approaching 7:20, so please keep that in mind. Item 7, Janice. can you present again on this? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. This is the annual report of the Head of Internal Audit. The purpose of this report is to provide a summary of the work undertaken by Internal Audit in 2019-20, which is attached as Appendix 2 to this report, and to provide the Head of Internal Audit's overall opinion on the adequacy and effectiveness of the Council's framework of governance, risk and control. The Head of Internal Audit report is at Appendix 1, and you will see on page 165 that the overall opinion is that the control environment only provides limited assurance that risks are mitigated and controls are operating effectively. South Ribble Council does have a sound governance framework in that, in general, appropriate policies, rules, regulations, etc. are in place. However, there are significant failings in respect of compliance with those policies and the operation of controls. A summary of findings are included at 3.7 to 3.9 of the report, which correlates to the findings that are in the annual governance statement. Appendix 2 provides a summary of the work undertaken in 2019-20, and the resources for the year are outlined at page 166. As can be seen from Appendix 2, the plan is showing as 152% completed, which means that we've overachieved on the plan. The detail of the variances are outlined on page 167 and 168, and the resources to support that detail is outlined on page 166. Page 168 at 5.7 also explains how the extra time was resourced. There's a brief overview of the findings, governance issues arising from the reviews, and any updates available at the time of the report at Appendix 3 to the report. Overall for the year, there were 10 audits with limited assurance and 2 with no assurance. If I just refer you back to the page 167 of the report, which outlines the planned days and the actual days, you will see that we planned audit work, we planned 165, actual was 152. There were 60 days outlined in the plan that were for emerging risks throughout the year, and against those days there was an actual of 106 days work, plus further governance work of 57.8 days. So for the total planned days, the actual days were 316 days. So that equates to 140.71% of the audit plan work. There's a bit of a breakdown that outlines where the variances have occurred on significant risks and controls that were identified. Some identified when Gary arrived, and things that were arising out of the AGS. I'm happy to take any questions or to explain any more if you need any more detail.
Thanks for that, Janice. Mark, is there anything you want to say at this point? I'm not sure if this is anything for you to comment on.
No comments from me really, Chair, other than to say this is one of the documents that we consider as part of our review of the Council's accounts.
Thanks very much, Mark. Councillor Foster.
I've nothing further to.
I'm sure that has already been said this evening, internal audit for their continued good work, and we will continue to deal with the many issues that we're facing.
Thanks, Councillor Foster. Members of the committee. Okay. Thanks for that. As we haven't got any questions for that. Chris,
Chair,
what's the...
Chair, I've just had my hand up.
You've come in late at the day. Go on then, Colin. I'll let you ask your question.
It was pressed at the time you said, have you any questions from members of the committee?
Go for it. Technology is wonderful. Go on. Fire away.
It must be the technology. You'll have to get that updated. Janice, this annual report relates to an audit plan for last year, doesn't it? I've not seen any audit plan for the current year. Is there one in place?
Go on, Janice.
Sorry, Chair. There was an outline of an audit plan before COVID happened, but the main thrust of that plan for 2020-21 is the follow-up work and the work arising from the governance failings for South Ribble, because we'll have to review all the reports that have had a limited assurance in this year, which, as I've said, there are 10 outlined, and some of them will have significant work that need doing and further testing. Because what we will want to see is that the recommendations have been implemented, but that the actions are also embedded so that it's changed the culture of that area or service that we've audited.
I accept that, but shouldn't we, as a governance committee, see a formal audit plan, whether it's a summary, so we and other members are aware of that audit plan?
Yes, that will be coming back to governance committee. At the moment, there are no auditors because they are both working in the community hub, and that's the decision that's been agreed with leadership team because of the actual skills that were needed within the service.
Fine, thanks, Jenna. I just wanted that point recorded for future reference.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. Thanks for that, and thanks for that, Janice. Chris, can you confirm the proposal around this item, please?
Thank you, Chair. The recommendation is that the committee firstly note the internal annual report for 2019-20, to note the progress of work undertaken against the annual plan, and to note the Head of Internal Audit's opinion on the adequacy and effectiveness of the Council's framework of governance, risk and control.
Thanks very much for that. I'm happy to move that proposal. If we have someone to second, please.
I'll second that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Sharples. I think that was. So it's roll call. Councillor Brotherton.
Noted.
Thanks very much, Councillor Clark. Councillor Clark. Is he muted? Are you muted?
Sorry,
Clark?
it's gone up again. It keeps putting me on mute. I don't know why.
Oh, I do it all the time.
All three recommendations noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. Councillor Amelia.
Noted.
Thanks very much. Councillor Sharples.
Noted. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. Councillor Mrs. Smith. Councillor Mrs. Smith. I know you're having problems. It's not your fault, Margaret. The connections must be rubbish. I'm happy if you wave at us. You're still on mute, I think, Councillor Mrs. Smith.
Yes, I've noted it. It's a bit difficult getting it off.
Thanks very much, Councillor Mrs. Smith. Thanks for that. And Councillor Turner.
Noted.
Thanks very much. Chris, can you confirm the outcome of the votes, please?
not on screen issue.
And if everybody else can mute themselves, thanks very much. Chris, can you confirm the outcome of the vote, please?
Yes, Chair. The internal audit report, the work against plan and the head of internal audit's opinion of adequacy of effectiveness of the Council's framework of government risk and control have been noted.
Marvellous, thanks very much for that. Okay, I'm mindful that it is almost 7:30, but we will take this last item. So item 8, update of closure of accounts 2019 to 2020. I think this starts on page 9 of the agenda. I'm going to invite James Thompson to present this item. James.
Thank you, Chair. I'll make this quick. This report is just to note the progress on the closure accounts for 2019-20, which are thankfully going well. The teams across the council are working well together. And just to note the revised deadlines, the statutory deadlines have been revised due to the outbreak of COVID-19. That the draft accounts now need to be signed off by the end of August, and the final accounts to be signed off by the end of November. We've already noted from Mark at Grant Thornton that this will also involve reviewing the annual governance statement and them giving their opinion on that. But we would ideally like to try, as per the will of the governance committee, to get a meeting into the in August, as we haven't agreed a date yet, but just to note that we will be trying to get a meeting in August to review the statement of accounts and sign them off. Just to also note that the outturn report will be going to July Cabinet this year, so you will have an idea of the outturns in council before the meeting in August. And I'll take any questions if you have anything to ask.
Thanks for that, James. Anything to add, Mark?
No comments from me at this point, Chair.
Thanks very much. Councillor Foster?
No comments, sorry, Chair.
Thanks very much. And any members of the committee? Just give it a sec for the technology to clunk into gear. No? Okay, that's great. So we're at the end of the debate on that proposal. Chris, what's the can you just confirm the proposal again for us, please?
Yes, Chair. It's to note the progress on the closure of accounts for 2019-20, including the revised deadlines for submission of the draft sign-off of the final accounts.
Thanks very much for that. So, Councillor Brotherton.
Noted.
Thanks very much. Councillor Clark.
Noted.
Thanks a lot. Councillor Amelia.
Noted.
Councillor Sharples.
Noted.
Thanks to both of you. Councillor Mrs. Smith. Councillor Mrs. Smith, is it?
Noted.
Thanks very much. And Councillor Turner.
Noted.
Excellent, thanks for that. Chris, can you confirm the outcome of the vote, please?
The progression of the closure of accounts and the revised plans have been noted, Chair.
Thanks very much. Well, thanks a lot to everybody. That brings us to the end of the meeting. I'm looking around at the people who are trying to help me, and I don't think there's anything else that I need to cover other than to thank you all for putting up with the technology and for all the officers for helping make this work while we're all still locked down and worried about the virus. Thank everybody for the massive amount of hard work that's gone into all these reports, and look forward to seeing you all either remotely or in person soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ian.